Episode 46, Second Nature. The boys are back for a classic bro pod. Aaron is back from China. What's up, buddy?
We are actually creeping up on episode 50, which seems unfathomable at this point. But in 2 weeks, that's crazy.
Fill the people in on what we have planned for episode 50.
I'm thinking maybe we should do an AMA, ask me anything, have everybody drop into Slack and just hit us with questions. But maybe we could also balance it out with maybe like a greatest hits where you and I can kind of riff on some of our favorite discussions that we've had and some of the stuff we've learned along the way. Because I don't know about you, but I've actually learned quite a bit from just being on this side of the microphone and just letting people talk. There have been especially some of the more recent ones have just melted my brain where like I honestly felt like I couldn't even ask questions. I was just, ugh.
I feel the same way. I feel like we've been on a bit of a heater, and we have some hitter guests coming up here. We probably shouldn't name them for fear of jinxing it, but we've got some high-powered C-level executives who will be on the podcast here soon. So, to our second naturalists, jump in Slack if we're doing an AMA for episode number 50. Are you going to start a new channel, Aaron?
I'll start a channel and then I'll let everybody know in maybe the discussion tab or something.
All right. So jump in Slack, ask us questions. Episode 50 will celebrate how far we've come by doing a quick little AMA before we continue this momentum that we're on here with Second Nature. And speaking of which, I guess, before we get to it, since we're not doing intros anymore on the podcast, let's remind our audience, go subscribe to Slack, go subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're listening to this on audio, subscribe to our newsletter at secondnature.media, and follow us on Instagram, secondnature.media there as well.
You know, the best and easiest way to actually support this podcast is actually watching and listening to the podcast on YouTube, because actually a lot of people don't want to like recommend podcasts to other people. And I totally get that because I understand how podcast recommendations can sometimes come across. But the beauty of YouTube is that it automatically does that for you. So if you're watching something on YouTube, it signals to YouTube that other people are watching it and it puts it in front of like-minded people on YouTube. So it's a super low barrier to entry way to do it. And actually the watch time gets us closer and closer to monetization. I think we're at like 727 subscribers and 2,100 hours of watch time. So when we hit 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time, then we're monetized. We're in the green.
Then we might actually turn this thing into a little bit of a side hustle. Who knows? But speaking of momentum, Aaron, you're doing a live contract signing on the podcast here today. Breaking news here, folks. Aaron Lutzy signing a pro contract live on episode 46 of Second Nature. Tell the people what you got going on, dude.
This is actually a 2-year contract with Marin Bikes, and I'm so fired up, man. Honestly, this relationship actually kind of started. I was old friends with their president and CEO, and I needed a bike to do a video for my channel, and I just hit him up on the side to say like, hey, could I just put you guys in front and center? Would you mind? Can you send me a bike to do this one thing? And then that video got 300,000 views. So there's a pretty good deal for everyone involved. And we just kind of kept working together, and they kept sending me bikes to feature in videos, and they're just such awesome people over there. And I'm just really fired up. I honestly cannot believe that at age 44, I'm signing like a pro contract, but this is happening. And it's just, dude, this is exactly what I've been saying this entire time. I mean, if this isn't the perfect example of like, you don't have to be at the top of the competitive mountain to still bring tons of value to brands. And, big props to the guys at Marin for seeing that. But also I'd like to think that through the work I've been doing, I've really made it an easy decision for them too. So I'm just like super fired up because now once I sign this thing, I'm locked into being a content creator riding my bike for the next 2 years. So
44-year-old pro athlete while being a father of 3, somehow doing it all. You're always an inspiration, Aaron Lutzy. And I just have to reinforce for our audience how ironic this is. As somebody who made their living distributing contracts and making dreams come true for other athletes, now you're signing contracts yourself. And it's very much well-deserved and an important moment to celebrate in the history of Super Rider, as you have launched off into the unknown, leaving a high paying corporate job to pursue this dream. And this is a bit of evidence that it's working. So congratulations, buddy, and a digital virtual pat on the back to you.
Thanks, man. All right, here I go. I'm going to sign it.
Sign it. Now
There
tell
it
us how much
is.
you make. Tell us how much.
Oh, that's like line 1 in here. I can't disclose.
Yeah. All right.
But,
all right, guys.
But it's a good vote of confidence, and I'm really excited, and it's hopefully the first of a handful of people that are kind of coming on board to really support this little dream here. So,
All right.
Stoked. Thanks, man.
That's my my clap track here on the podcast. Proud of you, buddy.
Thanks.
Really proud of you. So speaking of signing contracts, let's pivot to this Allyson Felix news. I think this is interesting because it dovetails on a lot of the stuff that we talk about here on the podcast. I got the article pulled up on my computer here. It came from Sports Business Journal. The headline is Allyson Felix's Always Alpha agency launches with focus on women's sports. Let me just read the first couple paragraphs here, and then I'll toss it to you, Aaron. What it says here is Olympic track and field legend Allyson Felix is one of the co-founders who today launched Always Alpha, the first talent management firm focused exclusively on women's sports. Always Alpha is a subsidiary of Dolphin, a NASDAQ-listed public relations, marketing, media production, and venture company. Her co-founders are Dolphin CEO Bill O'Dowd, her brother Wes Felix, and former Wasserman agent Cosette Chaput, who will serve as Always Alpha's CEO. This is just a quote now from O'Dowd. Quote says, the modern female athlete is public-facing and multifaceted. At Dolphin, we recognize the gap in the market to offer comprehensive management to athletes who overwhelmingly do not have managers, which is unlike their celebrity counterparts in the motion picture, television, music, and influencer industries, all of which we work with best-in-class companies that work hand-in-hand with the leading agencies and law firms. So, long story short, Allyson Felix, legend on the track, 4-time Olympian, I believe now part of the founding team on a women's exclusive talent management firm. Lutzi, your thoughts as somebody who just signed a professional contract?
Well, I think what's really interesting is although Allyson Felix is a legend on the field, also off the field, she has her own footwear brand. She's done so many groundbreaking things outside of competition. And some of the comments that she made in the interview surrounding this were basically like, I had to build this thing piece by piece by piece, and I had to figure it out. I made mistakes along the way, but I had to work really hard to really find my path after competition was over. And what she wants to do is make it really easy for that next batch of athletes that's coming through to have that level of support, that kind of roadmap available to them. And if you look at Dolphin Entertainment, they are, it's a pretty stacked team that has done all kinds of TV stuff. They've done movies, they've done social. I mean, their website's super impressive. I mean, they're just loaded. It's basically like a collection of a bunch of different agencies that do a lot of digital and content based things. Imagine being able to plug into like a high powered agency, not just from like negotiating talent contracts, but also negotiating or building content teams around these athletes to really supercharge what those deals look like. There's a ton that can be unlocked here. And I think if anybody understands how this can be unlocked, it's probably Allyson Felix.
Goes back to one of our early episodes where we talked about the rise of women's sports as being big business. And then a few episodes ago, I think it was when we were talking about Wazelle, where we talked about the investments that were being made by Alexis Ohanian in women's soccer and women's track and field. Allyson Felix, as you mentioned, has been an incredible businesswoman in her own right. She did an episode of How I Built This with her brother, who's a co-founder in Always Alpha, the agency. He's also her co-founder in Seish, their footwear brand. So they have an interesting sibling business partnership there. But I think this is interesting as a more evidence in terms of just like the power of the female athlete and their ability to speak to the female consumer. And in all likelihood, Allyson Felix and this team that they have assembled will do a great job of being that intermediary, people who understand what it takes to compete at the highest level, but who also understand business and what brands are looking for.
Absolutely. And there are still so many things left to be unlocked for women who are competing in different sports. I mean, Red Bull Rampage just had women competing for the first time ever this year. And while it's great that they got to, be in the event, and shout out to Katie Holden and a previous episode of Second Nature, there's still a lot of work for them to do to really build out their careers, and a path for them to follow that needs to be kind of defined in terms of how do they do deals, how do they build their careers, how do they do, they're still kind of breaking ground, and I see that happening in so many different sports. So the fact that there is somebody that's kind of putting together a roadmap, even if you're not part of Always Alpha, you're going to be drafting off some of the stuff that they're doing, and I think that's super super positive.
I wonder if there's some data. So to the Second Nature audience, throw it in Slack because I would really love to see how female consumers move the needle in sports categories versus male consumers. Because I don't know, I'm sure that data does exist. And my guess is that the purchasing power of women in, footwear and apparel, as it relates specifically to sports like track and field, which are probably leading indicators as to what might happen with mountain biking and trail running and snow sports and things like that. Like how the rise of women's sports and the media attention that they're now garnering and having inflection point moments like what's happening with Red Bull Rampage then impacts the brands and their ability to generate revenue around those female athletes.
I think Rebecca Rush may have sent me something. I'm going to definitely find this and drop it into Slack. But there was something about how the single, using Caitlin Clark as an example for NCAA, how she really had a huge impact where like a single athlete can really ignite an entire sport. And there aren't so many examples of men doing that, but in women's sports, there are sort of that iconic, Megan Rapinoe would be another great example, right? Where she really just like,
Courtney Dauwalter.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so there's a ton of examples like that. And there was some sort of research that I'm pretty sure it was Rebecca forwarded me that I'll put in the Slack because there was something really cool, and I'll try to find it so we can put it in the show notes as well.
Hey,
But
give us the breakdown on what happened at Rampage, especially with the inaugural women's competition.
well, you could read about it in the New York Times, which is incredible and awesome. And the live stream for the women did a couple 100,000 views alone, which is pretty incredible. The event went off without a hitch. The riders absolutely killed it. The person who won, she actually landed two backflips in her run, which up until recently, even the guys weren't doing flips at Rampage. So like the level of riding was crazy high, and they belonged there 100%. And I think, what's so special about the event and what really caught me was one of the athletes was being interviewed in the Finnish corral, and she said something about like, oh, that rider is going to be a future Rampage rider. And it was so just like, well, yeah, of course, like the door has now been open, and from here on out, like this is how it's going to be. And that was just such a cool, exciting moment because if I'm honest with you, there are a lot of different kinds of mountain bikers, right? There's the free ride mountain bikers that are in Rampage. There's also spandex wearing mountain bikers, and that's kind of the spectrum. And as a mountain biker, at least for me, when I talk to people and I tell people I'm a mountain biker, I want them to think that I'm more of like the Rampage style and not the spandex. No disrespect to my spandex wearing friends, but like Rampage is pretty cool. And even though I will never 360 off of 50-foot drop or anything like that, I still like get inspired and aspire to ride in an exciting way like that. And I think that in the same way that having the women riding in Rampage is not only going to inspire a generation who wants to ride in Rampage, but also is going to get a lot of people excited who might not have hopped on mountain bikes to emulate that style of riding. And so I think it's sort of like a rubber band where you pick up one part of it, but like the sides kind of come up at the same time.
Okay.
That's what I think was most important about Rampage. It's not just for the 8 women riding in the event. It's not for the women that are going to ride next year or maybe more. It's really about the thousands of women who are now going to say like, "Oh, I could see that. I want to do that. That's sick." And
That's
that's huge for all of mountain biking.
For those who are new to Second Nature, we'll remind them that you were my athlete manager at Red Bull. My new athlete manager, Reed Kasner, shout out to Reed. He told me that Rampage is Red Bull's biggest media property.
Yep.
That's wild to think about. Do you want to share anything more about like what makes the event so powerful for Red Bull as a brand? I mean, because I don't know, to me that was surprising.
Well, it's really just this global event. I mean, they have big events like Red Bull Flugtag that do well locally. You know, it's on every single news station and sometimes it makes ESPN. But when you really look at the footprint of Red Bull Rampage, it's basically spread to every corner of the globe. It's an event that you can't miss. It's iconic and it's been around for a very, very long time at this point. And I think it's just so crazy and it gets crazier every year. I mean, it's the definition of just like pushing it to the limit, right? And we always get a little bit nervous about this time every year that, you know, maybe this is the year that maybe something goes wrong, but thankfully like everybody keeps coming down safe, knock on wood. Um and yeah, I think it just captures everyone's imagination. They can't believe that somebody can do a double backflip on a downhill mountain bike over a huge canyon gap or a front flip off a drop. It just doesn't even it just seems surreal, really.
Explain why it's important for Red Bull, because I could envision it being proposed in a meeting a decade or 15 years ago, however long ago it was brainstormed. But now, I mean, it's not necessarily intuitive as to why that would drive so much interest in viewership at Red Bull TV. And in recent episodes, we've talked about how Red Bull takes such a long term approach, and they're not necessarily thinking of Red Bull Rampage as being something that will explicitly drive new consumers of the drink, but
Mhm.
is more so probably viewed as like a brand halo tentpole moment where they can just speak to a global audience. Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think you're totally right there. I think it's not a guaranteed thing that they have to keep bringing Rampage back. And in fact, there have been a few years where it's been like, do we keep doing this? And for a while, it actually wasn't on. They stopped doing it. Usually, the rule is like we do it for 3 years and then we kind of we move on to the next exciting thing. But this event is so unique. They've tried to go all over the world to find like another location where they could do it. Can they? There's actually a movie called Where the Trail Ends that was all about them going around the world trying to find different places where they might be able to have Rampage. They went to China, they went down south, they went everywhere and they just couldn't find anything like this one unique spot. But it is sort of a guaranteed win. I mean, sure, it's a gamble. Hopefully nobody gets hurt, but it is sort of a guaranteed win. It's a spectacle ultimately. I don't think it's meant to necessarily push into new boundaries. It's like everybody knows, yep, free ride mountain bike event. But then again, they added the women's category this year. The women's event drove additional eyeballs. It drove an article in the New York Times. It drove a lot of goodwill within the mountain bike community for Red Bull. So I think, there's still room for growth with the event, which is kind of exciting that you could be doing essentially the same event in the same zone for nearly 20 years and still find ways to kind of build on top of it.
Remember when we talked about Crankworks in one of our early episodes?
Mhm.
Is it the same style of athlete that competes in Crankworks versus Red Bull Rampage? And where do the two stack up in terms of their cultural relevance and significance to the mountain biking audience?
Oh, it's kind of interesting because the men's category is almost entirely exclusive Rampage riders. So they spend their entire year. So Carson Storch, for example, Red Bull athlete, I signed him years ago, and he only competes in Rampage and he'll do some free ride jams and stuff like that. But Rampage is like the event. So there's a level of specialization in the men. There are a few riders that can do both, but really you have to spend a lot of time. It's essentially like exposure therapy, doing giant drops and hitting huge gaps and stuff like that. In the women's category, is the complete opposite. It's the same, essentially the same lineup that does the Crankwork slopestyle events also does Rampage because their group of riders has yet to, kind of specialize and grow to that point.
Mm.
And that's how it was when the men started as well. Everybody was doing everything, and then it got big enough where you could start specializing and focusing in, and then the progression really took off.
Dope. All right. Well, I got to read that New York Times article. We'll make sure to link to it in the show notes. But Anyway, didn't anticipate going down the Rampage rabbit hole here, but that's how we do things on Second Nature. What we were gonna do is talk about your trip to China. I know you returned home with a Galaxy brand, so start wherever you want on Aaron Lutzi's trip to the Far East and back.
Oh man, I've got some notes. I took notes on the flight home of just some of the thoughts that I had while I was there. So maybe I'll just pull that up and we can start from there, and then I'll try to just like wind it back to my Galaxy Brain idea, which was actually the biggest thing that I noticed when I was over there. But anyway, we were on a family trip over there for the week, and it was actually the perfect place to do a little bit of a digital detox because you can't access Google over there or Gmail. So sort of a forced break from communicating with everyone, which was actually, sort of a nice thing to do, especially at this point in the year where everything has been crazy and whatever. But okay, let me go into a few things. Um, I only saw one person running in the city the entire time. She was wearing Under Armour of all brands. But the mountains and the trail systems throughout China look incredible. And to be fair, I was only in Beijing, and then we went to one place where we saw the wall. So I wasn't necessarily in like the top place where you'd see runners, but I kind of expected that I would see more people out running. But again, in a country of over 1 billion people, and I'm in one city, I'm not, I guess, expecting to see that many people. One thing that really struck me is that there are a lot of localized brands in China, and this goes for everything. For example, there are over 40 different brands of electric car. So and brands I'd never heard of, right? And the same thing went when it came to clothing brands, when it came to food, everything else, right? And this made me think like, what if instead of starting from scratch, trying to build a brand up from zero and going over there, because of course that's like a big manufacturing hub in China, what if instead of us trying to come up with everything from scratch over here, we just went there and adopted the brands that were already in motion because they are the factories, they are in direct communication with everybody making stuff happen. Couldn't it be easier instead of us trying to communicate all of our ideas to them? I wonder if there's some stuff over there when it comes to trail running stuff or mountain biking stuff that we could just kind of tap into and kind of help give a little bit more of a westernized feel to it, which would probably help it sell even better in China as well for a certain audience, especially with the growth of outdoor, both mountain biking and running. I wonder if there's an opportunity for something like that. Um, this was an interesting one. Fila. I haven't seen anyone wear anything Fila in ages, and that brand was everywhere over there. But what was funny about it is that you think that the F in the Fila logo is going to be like kind of iconic. That's their icon, but that same letter was used like in multiple different logos over there, which I thought was really interesting. Like it wasn't just Fila that got to do the double line, whatever thing. I thought that was really interesting how they had a bunch of different variations on what I thought was iconic. Let's see. The Great Wall is over 13,000 miles long, and I feel like there's an FKT attempt to be had.
That
I
is
don't know.
so crazy.
Yeah.
Did you actually spend some time there or lay your eyes on it?
Yeah, yeah, it's just staggering, and it goes up and over all the mountains, right? So the longest preserved stretch I think is like 5,500 miles long, and it's not simple to run. There's lots of ups and downs, uneven footsteps in there and stuff like that. But what a beautiful, I mean, like the countryside there is just so beautiful and be so easy and picturesque to put something together like that. I mean, obviously running 5,500 miles would be brutal, but
I mean,
um
that's longer than coast to coast in the US by 1,000+ miles.
yeah, yeah. But how
That
cool would
is
that
so
be?
wild. What a
It
feat of ancient engineering, isn't it?
it's I mean, really like the thing that stood out to me, just everywhere we went there, the scale of stuff is just massive. Like you go into Forbidden City and it's gigantic, and then you go to the Great Wall and it's gigantic. Like it's just everything is so big there. And the wall, I mean, yeah, you're totally right. It's just a complete feat of engineering to see it firsthand and on top of, these mountaintops and stuff. It was cool to be there, man. It was really, really cool. But I think that's probably one of the few untapped FKTs out there, unless you're aware of somebody
And
that's tried it.
You'd have to be crazy to go for it. I should look it up, see if it actually exists.
I
Somebody's
mean,
probably done it, right?
somebody probably has. Okay, so all that stuff was cool, but the thing that really stood out to me, these are all little tidbits compared to this last one. Over in China, they have basically this concept of the everything app. And there's actually a couple of them. There's Alipay and there's WeChat. Those are the two popular ones, right? And these apps will do literally everything. Like you could exist with one app on your phone. So you can do payment, like you can pay a vendor, you can get paid. You can also book a hotel, flight, train, you can get a cab, so it has like an Uber service built into it. This is all one app. Like there's just a bunch of little icons in it that are like, oh, do you want to do this? China has made everything frictionless when it comes to payments and just making stuff happen. You can watch movies in it. You can donate to charity. There's like an Amazon type thing in it. There's like a Google Maps kind of type thing in it. It's all jammed in to one app. And on the WeChat app, there's even a social media thing where actually you could find Super Rider on there if you want. So the thing that blew me away is how it was so simple to have one app and I could do everything in China. I didn't have to take my wallet out at any point. Everything was connected to this one singular Alipay app. And every vendor, street vendor, restaurant, whatever, you just scan the QR code and hit OK and everything's paid. It was so frictionless. It was
How's the
crazy.
user interface as an American going over there? Is it easy and intuitive to figure out?
Yeah, there's actually a translate button on it where it just switches everything over to English. Oh, you can also get a car loan on the same app that bought your pizza on or whatever. It's insane. Like they make everything easy in this regard. And it's just kind of shocking to me that in America we insist on having Venmo, Google Maps, Uber. I mean, there's like 50 different apps versus one app. How is it possible that we don't have a singular app that just does all the things?
So is this your galaxy brain? You're bringing WeChat to the US to run our entire lifestyles around? Because that doesn't feel like a second nature galaxy brain. That sounds like an Elon Musk galaxy brain right there. I'm not sure we have the funds or the expertise or the technical know-how to execute on that. My guess is you got a different idea.
This is the galaxy brain I want to riff with you on. What would like you can't do everything, sure, but what would the outdoor version of this app look like? The do everything outdoor app. So, I think we've seen a few people trying to circle around this idea, but imagine if there was an app where you could track your runs, you could register for events, you could find run groups, you could buy gear, you could book travel to races or do one of Maz's rogue expeditions, right?
Yeah.
You could watch films and other content. And then what might it look like if there were also brand pages on there? Could brands have little stores? Could they have their own content? Like, what does the brand and the athlete look like on a place like this? What would an app like that look like? And what else would you want to see in an app that did everything for outdoor? If you could just solve every single problem with one keystroke, basically.
So if we want to use the thought experiment of the one app for running, having it being a mapping tool, a registration tool, a shopping tool, I think the challenge is the inherent network effects that already exist, right? Strava is already dominant and ubiquitous with runners. Like there would be a major friction to adopting a new platform to catalog all your training and to, receive kudos and distribute comments to your friends' heroic training statistics. Similarly, like race registration, Ultra Sign Up exists, right? And they have a great product, great service, and people already have the habitual habit of like going to ultrasignup.com when they're interested in finding a race within 100 miles of them. Shopping might be a little bit easier. In fact, I had a galaxy brain on this. This is a totally organic double galaxy brain. Okay. So did you see I don't even know where I heard about this, but Taco Bell just released a new feature in their app that's like the name your price tool. So what you can do is instead of like going to their app and selecting, I want this taco, this soda, these chips or nachos, you can say, I want to spend $20, for example, and it will randomly select a few things from the menu. And if they look appetizing for you, you can hit pay or order. But if you don't like it, you can swipe or something, right? So it's almost like a dating app. Swipe, they'll do a different combo for you. What if you had something like that, Lucy?
a
So
buck
like if
a bucket of Baja Blast.
you're right. No, but like if using running as our brainstorm again here. So if you go to wanting to buy some new gear, right? And you have $500 to spend, for example, and it gives you a combination of shoes, shirt, pack, poles, maybe. And, it gives you like, and maybe it's pulling deals from different online retailers or something. And if you like the combo, you can order it. Or if you want a different combo, you can swipe again. So instead of like going to a place with a specific product that you're selecting, you're going with just the budget and asking the internet or the algorithm to show you things that it thinks you might want. Galaxy brain?
I think so. I think there's something there. It could be just fun in terms of building your kit for the year too, right? Like, and the other side of it is that, as you're selecting stuff or not selecting stuff, is probably getting smarter and knowing what to show you and what not to show you. I
Yeah.
think let's build this into the all in app. Here's the thing too about the everything app is that there are sort of like standalone programs that are included in the Alipay. So like Didi is basically the Uber of China. Didi is part of the Alipay app. So I'm not saying you have to swoop everything up, but I think you're also correct in that there are a handful of players that would probably be best suited in terms of having enough profiles already built in that they could pull it together. I actually think Ultra Sign Up could be an interesting route to go because they do have people signing up for events, and to sign up for events, you want to have, your gear for the event, you want to have travel to the event, you want to track your training to the event. There's a lot there that could actually be a sort of interesting way that they could go. And, maybe they go into ultra first and then they expand out into mountain bike and try and some of the other outdoory type sports just to make it available and grow that way. The other brand that I
Time
was
out real quick. I want to have David Callahan on. He's a listener to the show, we got to say. So
oh,
shout out David Callahan, his partner Jay Kelly over there at Ultra Sign Up. And he bangs this drum all the time about like using Ultra Sign Up as the registration to race day tool. So it's not just about the transaction and the registration for the event, but how can they be there with that runner every day for the 12 weeks in between registration when they line up with things like training knowledge, gear knowledge, media, inspiration, education, etc. Anyway,
I,
keep going.
I mean, really, what would Ultra Sign Up need to get to fill in this gap here? Maybe an acquisition of like Training Peaks or something like that, and then they have most of this stuff, right? Um, yeah, I don't know. I think there's something really interesting in here. The other brand that I was thinking of, which is sort of an outside one, maybe Peloton could do it too, because they have the training stuff, they have the training plans, they have the tracking, they have a giant list of people who need to put that energy from, doing the workouts into racing or, traveling somehow. I don't know. Maybe that's another interesting kind of fourth option besides outside and Strava, Ultra Sign Up. Maybe Peloton. I don't know. The interesting question actually at the end is it an open system or a closed system? So if you're the person that runs the everything app, do you make it where any brand product content can be part of the system? Or do you lock it in and say, no, this is all proprietary stuff. We're outside. So we've got Gaia and we've got Map My Run or whatever it is. It's all us. You can't be part of it. I feel like the open system would probably be a little bit more, I don't know, is trustworthy the right word? But I think people would probably be more apt to join in because they probably have profiles. They wouldn't have to make a new profile to jump in. I don't know.
Let's brainstorm on Strava for a sec because we may or may not be having a high powered executive from Strava on the program here soon. But I don't know. Thinking of the everything app for outdoor, Strava would definitely have the first mover's advantage if anybody were to execute on your vision here, Lucy, and your galaxy brain, because they already have so much data. There is that network effect. Me, for example, I have 10 plus years of training information cataloged there, which is inherently extremely valuable to me. And they've gone out of their way to not really commercialize it in the way that every other social network has, in that they don't have a bunch of ads everywhere, and they've really focused on the subscription being the bulk of their revenue. But if they were to bring brands into the ecosystem a little bit more, and they do have things where they do partnerships with brands specifically around what they call challenges. So engaging a brand to motivate people to complete some challenge, which they log and upload to Strava. But there's like, if you were to have a shopping experience for runners or cyclists, what better place than Strava?
Mhm.
And an app where runners and cyclists are already spending, so much of their time. Why wouldn't you buy your next pair of shoes from Strava? And they could, take a transaction fee, or I don't know. I mean, maybe that bolsters their ability to develop longer term partnerships with brands too, if they can also show the fact that they're putting their logo and their product in front of X number of athletes in X demo that they're targeting. It feels like Strava could very easily turn into the everything app of endurance sport.
Absolutely. And I've seen some of the brand pages on Strava, and I just feel like there's so much more they could do with specifically that. And if there was a sales channel there, I've just got to imagine that would make it even more compelling for the brands to get involved and to support where they're headed with it. We talked a long time ago on the pod about what would Strava add that would make it the most compelling, and we were thinking about things that are congruent with what you're using when you're using Strava. And one of the things that most people do when they're running is listen to Second Nature podcast. And so adding a podcast player into Strava would be such a slam dunk. The other thing that we haven't talked about is that of the four that we've mentioned, Strava is actually an app and an app developer. So they're loaded with engineers who could actually make this stuff happen. Where I think, some of the other brands may have like an extra step that they have to do to actually make the everything app, where Strava just has to introduce like a fleet of features to really just close the gap here, and they're done. Probably they could find a retail chain that's distressed and just pick that up and have instant access to inventory. But man, can you imagine like, oh, I saw Killian's latest KOM and now I'm just gonna click on his shoes and now I have his shoes.
Yeah.
That'd be insane.
Yeah, but think about it as a training catalog and tool and social network. If you had a marketplace type thing, you could also even have, you mentioned Training Peaks a little while ago. That's kind of the most popular coaching platform. There's no reason why coaches wouldn't use Strava instead of a Training Peaks type platform. And then, yeah, like even downstream of that with event activations and registrations, they could probably even do that. So Strava's probably in a good position to be the everything app for outdoor, like you experienced over there in China.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's so fascinating because I think you're right in that, your initial pushback was like, "Oh, well, there's already an app for this and already an app for that." And they just figured out a way to include everybody in. And so it's really the onus is on the brand, the platform to reach out to other brands to say, "Do you want to come on this journey with us because we think we can do something really incredible here." I mean, it would be a quantum leap forward for anybody who actually did go through it, but I think the juice would actually be worth the squeeze on this one because, yeah, like, how are you going to compete with that? How? Like, if Strava did that, y- everybody just like pack up your stuff.
Anything else from the China trip that you noticed or that inspired you for Super Ride or Second Nature or anything else?
Man, just like I said, the scale there is huge. There are so many people there, and the opportunity is so big if you can figure out how to break through in that market. And, I'm obviously actively trying to do just that through the content that we're putting together there. But yeah, I don't know. I got so fired up being over there and just seeing it firsthand.
Did you see any American brands over there in a powerful way,
There's a
or
lot of
European ones
There's
for that matter?
a lot of Nike over there for sure. Like everywhere. I think that was the only thing that I really one takeaway that I didn't mention is that, we talk about these challenger brands. They're not showing up in places like China. It's all established brands. I saw Under Armour, I saw Adidas, I saw Nike, Puma, but I didn't see any on other than my own shoes. I didn't see Hoka's. I didn't see anything. It was all like the brands that have been around for a very long time and are super established.
Yeah, there's probably a delay to that adoption in markets like that. It'll probably be 3 or 5 years from now where Hoka and On will establish more of a foothold there.
Yeah.
As
You've
they've
got you've got brands over there like Anta and Li Ning. They're both like big over
huge.
there, right?
Yeah.
They're like the Nike of China. And that's exactly what I was trying to say of just what if you were to adopt one of those brands and be like, "Hey, we can get you into the fastest growing sport in the US. How would you like to work with us on a shoe design and some outerwear and this and this and this? You have the resources because you're the Nike of China, but like the US stuff isn't really popping. So how about we give you a lift and work together on this whole thing instead of starting from scratch?"
You're
I
ruining my BPC here.
I'm sorry.
No, no, all good. But it is really interesting to see the brands that are successful in China. And then, yeah, the likes of Anta and Li Ning, which are behemoths, juggernauts in that market. But I would guess the vast majority of our listeners maybe have never even heard of Anta or Li Ning.
Pretty crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I'm glad you made it home safely. Hope you had a great trip. Let's see. The next thing on our docket here is talk about Nike ACG real quick. You want to get us started?
Sure. So it was just announced that Nike is going to kind of bring back or revive ACG, all conditions gear, which is, what do they say here? They've reportedly tasked Angela Dong, Nike's top executive in Greater China, with overseeing its outdoor sub brand ACG as Nike revisits its opportunity in the outdoor space to revive growth. So this is kind of interesting because ACG was sort of the original outdoor and trail gear before we saw Nike Trail come on board, Nike Sportswear. There was Nike Action Sports, Nike 6.0, if you remember that one. There have been a lot of different shots on goal when it comes to getting this group of people excited about Nike. And now you see them actually starting to put this back into development. I don't know if this is sort of a downstream effect of the new leadership over there, or if this was something that was already happened. But one thing that does stand out is that the two people who are going to be overseeing the brand are both based in China. So I'm not actually sure if this is going to
Mm.
even hit US shores or if it's just going to be over in China. And I don't know where ACG stood on the hierarchy of excitement over there either. I know ACG was pretty popular in Europe. And so if it's something that was popular in China, is it just a localized decision that they decided to bring it back? Or does this sort of a big change that might be coming? Could they be developing it in a different market? And then when they bring it back over here, once they get it ready to rip, I don't know.
ACG has always been, I think, one of the most interesting sub brands in the space with products that are usually pretty innovative and have that cool factor and scarcity that drives sales on platforms like StockX. If you in the olden days, like 10 years ago, whatever, if an ACG shoe or jacket dropped, that was like a hot product. One thing that I think is interesting is just came to mind, but if you really invest in ACG as a sub brand of Nike, it's kind of analogous to what Adidas does with their sub brand Terex. So Adidas's outdoor division is known as Adidas Terex. And I wonder what the benefit of that is to have like the sub brand that is core to a different niche than what they're traditionally known for, team sports, performance sports, and having something that is specific to the outdoor market. Do you have any insight into that or any thoughts?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting that the outdoor industry is just kind of on fire right now, just absolutely growing leaps and bounds, and that this brand is finally capitalizing on it. I mean, they've got to be looking at all the corners to say, like, all right, we got to get this ship back on track. How are we going to right the ship when it comes to new and innovative product? And ACG was, to your point, always sort of a source of innovation and maybe one of the easier paths to take to kind of get some of this stuff firing again. Um, I wonder, and I'd be curious to hear your opinion because, yeah, you're right. Terex also kind of competes with Nike Trail. So
Yeah.
does ACG gobble up Nike Trail, and do
That's
they
where I was going with that. Because
make a big push?
they have built brand and cachet around Nike Trail as a property itself. In fact, they even have like the cool Nike Trail logo. And shout out to Lauren Gregory, Nike Trail athlete, took second place at the Golden Trail World Championship last weekend, or World Final over in Switzerland. She's coming on the Free Trail pod here really soon to talk about it. But that's the first thing that came to mind is like, if you're going to double down on ACG as the sub brand, which does have a lot longer legacy than Nike Trail, does ACG gobble up Nike Trail? And because you could see it being confusing to have two sub brands that are connected to outdoor, unless ACG was more of like a Gorpcore lifestyle type outdoor product line, and Nike Trail was like very specific to trail running. But you could see the pros and cons of both, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they sort of missed the Gorp Core window if our previous podcast is to be believed. But
I don't believe it. I don't
the other,
believe it.
Me neither. But the other thing that is sort of could be interesting is that this press release or article came out on the 17th of October, and it could very well mean that there are other press releases and hires about to drop as well. So we're seeing China right now, but could we see a US, division forming up or something else that's going on? I mean, just because we see one doesn't mean that there isn't another one sort of in the works. I heard through the rumor mill that there's a lot of people from Terex coming back to the U.S. to the Portland office for Adidas. So are they gearing up for battle on both fronts to really take a stab at the outdoor market again? Could be really interesting to watch this one go down. The opportunity is definitely there. And if you really think about the challenger brands, they've made a ton of inroads when it comes to trail running and running in general, right? And where could they actually sort of stop the advance? Probably, taking it right to Hoka, taking it right to On with some of the outdoor stuff.
I'm just skimming through this article on SGB. So just to give a little historical context here, our listeners might find it interesting. What it says in the article is Nike launched ACG in 1989. That's crazy, as its foray into outdoor apparel and footwear. Initially, it received success for standing out for its more athletic performance features and brighter colors in the staid boot category. In 1998, Nike spun ACG off into its own operating unit, and Gordon McFadden, previously of Helly Hansen, was named president of Nike ACG. McFadden left Nike in early 2001, and the brand lost considerable momentum in the ensuing decades. In 2014, Nike rebranded Nike ACG to Nike Lab ACG, focusing more on urban markets. So again, it did become more of like urban outdoor wear. So it'll be interesting now with this new reinvestment into ACG if they're going to get more performancy.
And for context, around 2000, I think it was 2004 is when they launched Nike 6.0, where they really went after a lot more of the outdoor sports. So it was like the 6.0 was six different skate, surf, snow, mountain bike, BMX. I think wakeboard was the sixth one. But the joke in Portland was it was Nike 6.0 because it was Nike's sixth attempt to get skateboarders to like the brand. But of all the sports
It
that they
worked.
yeah, Nike skate actually stuck around. Everything else kind of faded into obscurity. Actually, a handful of the athletes ended up on the sportswear line. But just to put that in context, like yes, ACG lost momentum, but it may have just been resources getting pushed into some of their skate efforts instead, which is sort of a similar consumer.
Super interesting. We will continue to monitor it here on your favorite outdoor journalistic enterprise, secondnature.media. I want to give credit to the article that I was reading here. This was from sgbonline.com. We'll make sure to link to it in the show notes for those who want to continue their reading. BPC. Oh, I got to mention here, we had some banter in Slack that people weren't fully sure of what BPC meant. So to make it explicit here to new listeners of Second Nature, BPC is our closing segment, brand product content, where Lutzi and I choose something from among those categories that inspired us during the week. Lutzi, get us started.
Okay. It is officially fall in the Northwest, which means that I'm getting rained on pretty much every single day. And one of the things that I've been doing for the last year or so, I've been trying to walk a lot, like 5 miles a day. And I just feel better. I don't know. It's just working out pretty well for me. So I'm trying to sneak in little 1 mile loops around my neighborhood. And that's when I call you and talk to you on the phone usually, and all of our other friends. But I got this pair of shoes this year called Vessi, Vessi. They are waterproof shoes and they look legit, but they are completely waterproof. And I don't know if you know, but I used to wear Ultra Boost semi religiously, and they're basically like socks. So I'd always end up having wet feet when I'd go out and walk. I got these Vessi boots and they are clutch. I have not had wet feet at all, and they're going to come in super handy over the next couple months.
75 and sunny down here, buddy. Cool. Vessi boots. I'm just looking them up here on Instagram. Looks like a good product.
They're so comfortable. I've been wearing them like even though it hasn't been rainy, I've been wearing them all summer as well. They're just like legit shoes and they just kind of slip on. So
Hell yeah. All right, I got two. One that you nearly ruined in our China segment. Have you heard of the brand Kailas? Kailas. So it's basically the Anta equivalent for outdoor in China. And it's kind of confusing. So if you go to kailasgear.com, their sort of sub running brand as part of Kailas is Fuga, Fuga. Anyway, you continue to see more and more of this product around in the trail running market. They sponsored the Tour de France, which is this massive 200-mile mountain race in the Aosta Valley of Italy. So Chinese brand sponsoring this huge long distance race in Italy. They're starting to sponsor more athletes. And I read an article in the Mile and Stone newsletter, a great sort of B2B focused trail running newsletter, where they interview the founder of Kailas. And in this interview, he said that Kailas does $700 million in revenue.
Whoa.
And again, like, you'd have to be deep in the trail running market to ever notice this product around in the US or in Europe. So they're probably doing at least 75% of that revenue just in China. Speaks to just what a monster market it is. And the sport is exploding there. So I just wanted to bring that into the conversation because it is specific to outdoor much more so than Alipay or WeChat or Anta or Li-Ning. But I think Anta is actually starting to sponsor more athletes, the equivalent of Nike sponsoring trail runners. Anta's starting to do that too. And Anta has also sponsored the Hong Kong 100K, which is probably the biggest race in Asia. So very interesting, parallel to our conversation about your trip to China there. And then I wanted to just give a shout out to my buddy, Nicholas Benzer, who actually I don't know super well, but I consider him my buddy because I am a big admirer of what he's doing. If you look him up on Instagram, Big Day Concepts, he's basically just a one-man chop shop making cool trail running products. So packs, pole quivers, he's just making shorts now. Anyway, I talked to him last week. I'm trying to convince him to start a brand with me or help us make some product ourselves, but I think it's a tough nut to crack. And anyway, he's already got his own cool thing going on there. So I wanted to give him a shout out. And Big Day Concepts, you got to follow him on Instagram. He doesn't upload much to his main feed, but he always uploads these cool things to his stories. So again, just a craftsman who's making cool products for himself that I can't help but want to buy. And at this point, I don't think he's commercializing anything, but he's more so just using it as a way to challenge himself. And I really admire that. So Big Day Concepts on Instagram, Nicholas Benzer. He's a German guy, but he lives in Portland. Actually, I should connect you with him.
Oh, that's rad. Yeah. Sweet.
He actually worked at Terex for a while.
Oh.
All right, Lucy, we're back, bro.
We are back.
Yeah.
I'm so jet lagged right now.
Yeah, our listeners don't get it, but we haven't spoken in a while. We had a bunch of content banked, and then you went off on your trip. So anyway,
little digital detox, but we are absolutely back. And if this backlog of talent comes through, we got some exciting stuff on the way, and we've got episode 50 coming soon. I can't wait. I'm so excited. I can't believe we've done almost 50 episodes of this podcast. Surely it helps that we did 2 a week for the last however many weeks, but still 50 times, not bad. We haven't missed, I don't think we missed an upload at all, have we?
Not too shabby. So go jump in the Second Nature Slack. Aaron's going to create a channel that'll help guide our AMA conversation for episode number 50. No questions off limits. Well, maybe some, but you get the point. Go subscribe to our newsletter, secondnature.media. Look us up on YouTube. As Aaron said at the top, just press play on your YouTube and let us fly over there. That'll help us with the algorithm. Secondnature.media on Instagram. We're going to start being more consistent posting over there. And maybe most importantly, Second Nature Media on LinkedIn. Aaron just posted a bunch of new cool job opportunities that were curated by our buddy Matt Sharkey on LinkedIn. So if you're looking to expand your career in the outdoor industry or to break into the industry, that is a good place to start. For Aaron Lutzi, I'm Debo. See you soon.